And Jonathan, we always appreciate you stopping by A's Cast Live. Before we get into uh, all the stuff that I want to talk about when we talk about prospects, I want to highlight your new book, Smart, Wrong, and Lucky: The Original Stories of Baseball's Unexpected Stars. You know, we all think about the great ones when they get drafted. Like Ken Griffey got drafted, and you knew right away this guy was going to be great. It doesn't always work that way. Talk about your book.
Yeah, I mean that's exactly the kind of stories I tried to tell in this book. Thanks, guys, for having me. Uh, I spend all my time, most of my time, day to day talking to scouts, and they're such great storytellers. And they're the ones that find these guys. They see something in them, and for every Ken Griffey Jr. or Alex Rodriguez, or a guy like that, there's Albert Pujols, who's a 13th rounder out of a small junior college. Lorenzo Cain was a draft and follow in the, taken late in the 17th round. He hadn't played an inning of baseball before his sophomore year of high school. Ian Kinsler played at 3 different colleges and was a 17th round pick and amassed more WAR than anybody in his draft class. The list goes on and on. The good thing is I could, write 3 or 4 sequels in this and never run out of these great stories. So it's all stories like this. And, scouts are pretty smart and humble. So even though I gave them the chance to say, hey, now's your chance to say, I knew Jacob deGrom when we took him in the 8th or 9th round as an 88 to 90 mile an hour finesse pitcher who had mostly been a shortstop in college, that he was going to be the best pitcher on earth for a few years. You can say, yeah, I knew it. And none of them would take the bait.
Yeah, I remember when I was my senior year, before I went and played in college, my senior year of high school, our draft class, I played a lot with Tony Clark in San Diego, but it was Chipper Jones and Tony Clark. Everybody knew who they were. Right. And then I think about somebody like Mike Piazza. Like, he had the connection to Tommy Lasorda. Ted Williams came and watched him hit. I mean, he's one of the greatest right-handed hitters, one of the greatest hitting catchers of all time. Nobody knew who Mike Piazza was.
No, and I didn't even include Mike in this one, only because that would fall into the lucky category of smart, wrong, and lucky, just because that wasn't even a terrific job of scouting. That was having a connection and kind of doing a favor for Tommy Lasorda that really, really worked out. But it does show you that talent can come from pretty much anywhere.
I've noticed my relationship with scouts. Scouts love athletic ability. They see something in a guy. There's certain traits that they'll like, and they'll understand everybody's got warts. But there's certain scouts that you see over time, they nail it a lot. Not everybody, because when you're dealing with human beings, you're not always going to nail it. It's just not possible, right? But what is it about the guys that you have talked to over the years, especially the guys you really can trust? What is the characteristic that scout has that makes them have the ability to find players?
I don't know if it's one particular trait. So many of them work so incredibly hard. So I can't say that they just outwork everybody. Some of it's just a feel, really understanding. It's so hard to translate. Think about when you're looking at a high school player, and let's put aside the international guys, because you're scouting guys when they're 15 years old, and trying to project what they're going to be like when they're 25 is impossible. But you're looking at a 17-year-old, say maybe 18-year-old, playing high school baseball, and maybe not against great competition if it's not from one of these big baseball states, and trying to figure out, okay, let's add 6 years to them. Let's put a wood bat in their hands, and what are they going to be? Tell me who's going to be the next star. So having a sense and a feel for that it's such an inexact science, and even the best get it wrong all the time. But there are those that really do stand out. A guy like the late Mike Radcliffe, I think, comes to mind as one of the legends. Unfortunately, we lost him to cancer not long ago. But the reason why the Minnesota Twins took Walker Jenkins in the first round is because last summer Mike snuck out when he wasn't supposed to be out going to games because he was sick, and put an 80, which is the top of the scouting scale, on Walker Jenkins. That's a big reason why he's a Minnesota Twin right now.
Well, and I think about, Grady Fuson in our organization, sure. Keith Littman, who just retired. I mean, 54 years with the Oakland Athletics. Well, actually the Athletics, because he dates back to Kansas City. That's how long Keith Littman. So when you think about great scouts, Grady Fuson's a friend. Grady Fuson's won every award you possibly can. And
Sure.
he was in the movie Moneyball that was up for an Oscar. So scouts, these guys can play such a huge role in your organization. But I got to ask you this question because it's tormenting me right now with where the A's are. From my time also working in the NFL and from my time working in the NBA, baseball loves to call guys young, and they love to use and fall back on the excuse of guys are young. It's a young team. It's a young this. And then all of a sudden I start looking at ages and I go, wait a minute, this guy's 24. This guy's 25. This guy's not 19. This isn't someone like Al Kaline coming out of high school and playing for the Detroit Tigers. So I want to ask you, when we start talking about young, what age should we really be looking at where we can really say, well, they're going young and it's a young team and they're losing because what is young to you in Major League Baseball?
I think if you don't know who Al Kaline was when you just referenced him, that's young. I'm kidding. I think there's young, like just in terms of how, the biological age, and then there's young in terms of experience. And I think your point is a valid one, because I think the game is skewed younger and you're seeing more and more superstars, do incredible things in the big leagues at a younger age than some of the players that are coming up to the A's. But I think it's really more they have never played in the big leagues before. There's a learning curve there, regardless of how old you are. In a perfect world, guys that are a little bit older might be able to hit the ground running a little bit more. I mean, and maybe you're seeing that with a guy like Zack Gelof right now. But I think it's more inexperience than it is biological age.
Yeah, it's tough because I know with biological age is how we view guys when they get into their 30s. And, you go to like the winter meetings and you're talking to all these front office people, they don't want to pay guys in their 30s. So if guys in their 20s, let's say 23, 24, maybe even 25, I've heard some guys being called young. Those guys are young. We don't want to pay in your 30. I mean, we have this really small window here, right? Of like, okay, you're young or you're old. I mean, there's that short. I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it to fans.
No, I don't think you're wrong there. And it just means that window for some of these players who are coming up now is a smaller window than it is for a super young guy, coming up, and even for looking at guys within the A system, the window for Tyler Soderstrom to figure it out is longer. That's why there are a lot of people who advocate that guys should just sign out of high school. Just looking from a player's standpoint, right? If you want to get a good free agent contract, you almost have to sign younger or be one of those guys who gets to the big leagues really, really fast, like a Zach Nato for the Angels. I think Jacob Wilson, the A's first round pick, is a guy who should be able to move pretty quickly and get to the big leagues while he's still relatively young. Because if you don't do that, as you pointed out, teams don't want to pay the guys who are over 30 because all the data shows that once you're north of that age, and there are exceptions to every rule, and I think guys are in better and better shape for longer than they used to be, but you're less likely to get that big free agent contract if you're past that 30-year benchmark. And so if you're not coming up to the big leagues until you're 24, 25, your chance to get that payday from the player side is shorter, but also from a team standpoint, the chance for you to maximize the productivity you're going to get before a player reaches arbitration or you're going to have to pay them is much shorter.
That's why we love bringing you on, because that was really interesting, because we're talking about life, right? These are life decisions when you're a young man and you're thinking about, okay, do I want to go the college route? Do I want to go the minor league route? I think, I'm very fortunate that I got to play college baseball. I'm very fortunate that I got my school paid for and I got my education that has led me to this career versus high school, sign, better chance long-term to get the jackpot, the huge money, right? So it's like, it's great life lessons. There's so many things you learn, not only as a baseball player or as an athlete. We talk football, basketball, whatever. There's so many great advantages to going to college and getting a degree for your life. But then there's also great advantages of getting drafted out of high school. that's a really tough call.
Sure. And then we're talking, if you really think about it, right, we're talking about a very small percentage of players who really have to think about it, because the vast majority of high school players either need college or have to go to college because they're not going to, get drafted early enough or even going to get drafted at all. And I think, for the most part, this recent time period because of COVID threw things a little bit off kilter, but the scouting industry has done such a great job of finding the best high school players and signing them, especially hitters. Dylan Cruz, who was the number 2 pick in this year's draft, is a little bit of an outlier, I think, because his senior year of high school was the COVID year and he wasn't scouted the way he normally would have. So he removed himself from the draft and went on to LSU and had a huge college career. That's happening less and less because I think the industry is recognizing exactly what we're talking about. But we're talking about a very select number of high school players who even have to sort of try to quickly make this calculation as to what's best for them in their future.
And that's why when you look at your book, Smart, Wrong, and Lucky, the origin stories of the baseball's unexpected stars tells you there's a lot of roads on how we can get to the big leagues. Let's get to some A's guys. Gelof, I mean, my God, it's just been a start that it's historic. What did you think of him before, and what do you think of him now?
I guess I'll start with the sort of usual caveat that, what he's doing right now is fantastic. It is absolutely phenomenal, especially power-wise. It is a very small sample size. So I don't want people to jump to a conclusion and start, engraving his plaque in Cooperstown.
We already put it there. If you
all right, I mean that's fine. If you snuck it in there, good for him. I like Zack a lot. I met him in the fall league. I always liked him. He kind of was one of these guys who was like on the brink of our top 100. He was on it. He was off it. He's on it again now. He doesn't do it the way like the swing. Some scouts would look at the swing and be like, "Oh, I don't know, that could get exposed." In the minors, he got banged up some, so it was even hard to tell exactly what he was going to be. I think he's going to hit. He's a good athlete, and I think we may look back and realize that we probably undervalued him, and he may be a better big leaguer than he was, thought of as a prospect, especially because he's athletic. You could move him around if you wanted him to. He runs well. It looks like the power is going to play. I just don't want people to get, have too unfair expectations for him based on what he's done this year. But this has exceeded expectations based on sort of where we thought he was.
Well, get ready for this one. All right. You want to talk cart before the horse. Lawrence Butler comes up, 6'3", super athletic, had a great spring. And we're like, when's the last time the A's brought up a guy like this? The name Jose Canseco gets brought up when he was the rookie of the year. But Lawrence Butler, what do you think so far? And what do you think? Well, actually, it's only been a couple games. But
yeah,
what do you think of Lawrence Butler and what he can be? Because obviously he's a very athletic 6'3" guy.
Yeah, he's really interesting to me because I think this is where young and inexperienced is more, because 23 is still young, but it seems like we've been talking about him for a while as a guy who signed out of high school. It took him a little bit. That swing is going to work. I think it's going to work. It's just a question of, is he the kind of guy who is going to tease with that ability and strike out a ton? I think his approach has improved, but this is a guy who's got legitimate 2020 potential. It's just a question of him consistently finding the barrel in order to do that. But it's all in there. And, he's a guy who can play the outfield corners. He can play first base, even though he hasn't done it. You don't necessarily need him to do that. But there are a lot of ingredients there to like. And I think you're right. While that kind of comparison, and I hate major league comparisons in general, but comparing him to someone like Jose Canseco is completely unfair. It is true that it is, to have a guy sort of big, physical, and athletic like that. You haven't seen a lot of that. And there's an excitement that comes with that kind of player automatically.
By the way, Ian Kinsler gets brought up with Gelof all the time around here.
Yeah, and he and Zack loves Ian. I've done a lot of stuff with Team Israel over the years, and one of the selling points when I was talking to Zack in the Arizona Fall League about playing in the World Baseball Classic was, who's going to manage that team? you could pick Ian Kinsler's brain for like, the time that you're there. And that was a big selling point. And I'm sure he maximized his time with Ian just in terms of how he went about it. And I think there are some, that's not a terrible comparison. But of course, no one thought Ian Kinsler was going to be Ian Kinsler when he first came up either.
Well, I got to tell you, you're getting old when you start covering kids and you played against their dad. I played against Steve Soderstrom when he was at Fresno State. So all of a sudden, his kid is our first round pick. You're like, wow. So what do you think of Tyler?
It's been interesting. And speaking of old, by the way, Justin Crawford was in the Futures game. I'm going to digress just for a second. His dad was Carl Crawford. I covered Carl Crawford in the Futures game. So I covered his dad as a prospect and then his son as a prospect. So that the fact that he was in the draft was hard enough, Andrew Jones and Justin Crawford. But I think that Tyler Soderstrom's the kind of guy you just have to let go, let him hit. It's going to take a little while to adjust. I actually was expecting to dominate in the minors this year a little bit more. The power is very, very real. And maybe even more so than Lawrence Butler. It's going to be a consistency thing. And I think he's going to get there. You're going to have to live with some strikeouts. I know the catching has improved to the point where he's caught almost as much as he's played first base this year, which is encouraging. It'll be interesting to see what happens long-term, just in terms of other personnel in the system and things like that. But I do think that, the left-handed power is very, very real. As long as you can, live with some strikeouts. I don't think he's going to be a three true outcome kind of guy, but he may never hit for a huge average, but you might get 35 to 40 homers every year.
Let's end on this, and we truly appreciate your time. If you had to say out of the 30 teams handling your minor league system, now all teams are different because of payrolls and markets and all that kind of stuff, but we do have 30 different minor league systems. If you had to pick one team that you say this team should be the model, which team would that be?
For the A's or just in general?
Just in general.
Well, because just in general, it's hard to look past to say what the Los Angeles Dodgers have done because they win every year and they manage a really good farm system. Not everyone has the financial wherewithal to keep big leaguers. So if I were to pick another team that made more sense for a wider swath, and that's why I was asking specifically maybe about the A's. Or I live in Pittsburgh, so the Pirates. I'd have to, the Pirates are doing well right now.
Let's switch the parameters.
Yeah, so I'd say
like Pirates, Royals.
Yeah. So the Pirates are doing well right now, but they had to kind of hit the switch again. I think the Tampa Bay Rays are the team that probably are the sort of standard bearer for not being a large market, not having huge revenue, but competing now seems every year and maintaining a really good farm system. And they do it by drafting well, but also, if you notice, even when they trade for a big leaguer that maybe helps them out down the stretch in a playoff race, they always get some like low-level, complex league, rookie ball kind of guy who ends up being one of the best prospects in baseball. And I always say, like, if the Rays are calling and asking about a guy that you have in your complex league, hang up the phone because that guy ends up being some superstar eventually. But so they find ways, every way that you can bring in minor league talent, they do it, draft internationally and via trades. They just seem to get it right on all those avenues. So that's probably the organization I would point to.
Hey, great stuff. We always appreciate the time. We'll pump the book for you. Be well, and let's talk soon.
Sounds good, Chris. Thanks very much.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Talking about our players, smart, wrong, and lucky, the origin stories of baseball's unexpected stars.